I, female, 34, think my husband's, male, 38, ex-wife is trying to scam us with a fake paternity claim, and I don't know what to do. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. So, my husband Michael and I have been married for 3 years now, dated for 2 years before that. We have what I thought was a pretty good life. We bought our first house last year in a nice suburban neighborhood after saving for literally 4 years for a down payment. We're not rich by any means, but we're comfortable. I work as an elementary school counselor. Love my job, even though it can be super stressful sometimes and doesn't pay amazingly. And Michael is a software developer who works from home most days for a company that's based in another state. For context, Michael was married before to this woman named Heather, female, 36. They were together for 6 years before they got divorced about 5 years ago. The split was supposedly amicable, at least that's what Michael always told me, and they share custody of their daughter, Caitlin, female, 12. Caitlin stays with us every other weekend, plus Wednesday evenings for dinner. I've really tried to build a good relationship with her without trying to be her new mom or anything weird like that. We go shopping sometimes, see movies, and I help with her homework when she needs it. She's actually a really sweet kid. Anyway, Michael has always been super responsible about paying child support for Caitlin. Never missed a payment, always on time. But over the past year, things with Heather have gotten weird. She's always been kind of financially irresponsible. Like one time she asked Michael to loan her $3,000 for emergency car repairs, and then literally the next week posted pics of herself in Cancun on Instagram. But lately she's been asking for money more and more frequently for Caitlin's expenses that seem suspicious. So here's what happened. Last Sunday, we were just having a normal day, making lunch for Caitlin, talking about maybe going to the park later. Then the doorbell rings. Michael goes to answer it, and I hear voices getting loud in the entryway. I walk in, and there's Heather standing in our living room. She literally just pushed past Michael into our house without being invited in, with this little boy who looked maybe 2 years old. She told Michael this was his son while pushing the confused toddler forward. Michael just stood there completely frozen, staring at this kid with a look of total confusion on his face. I was like, what the actual hell is happening right now? So I asked, and Heather just sneers at me. I'm not exaggerating, she literally sneered and told me this didn't concern me. Excuse me, this is my house too. Then poor Caitlin appears in the doorway looking so embarrassed and anxious. I felt terrible for her having to witness whatever this was. Michael finally said this was impossible and the boy couldn't be his. Heather started claiming she got pregnant right before their divorce was finalized. But that made no sense because they've been divorced for 5 years and this kid is clearly only about 2. When I pointed this out, she immediately changed her story and claimed they hooked up one night 3 years ago when Michael was dropping off Caitlin. Michael denied this ever happened and actually pulled out his phone right there to show her he was literally out of town on a work trip that entire week she was talking about. Then she gets to the real point and demands $20,000 in back child support plus ongoing monthly payments. Like, just straight up demanded it. The thing is, this kid, who she called Ricky, looks nothing like Michael. Michael and Caitlin both have straight blonde hair and really fair skin. This little boy had dark complexion and curly black hair. Know who he did look like? Heather's boyfriend Craig, who she's been with for at least 4 years, on and off, but mostly on. We immediately told her we'd need a paternity test, and oh my freaking god, she went ballistic. She started screaming about us abandoning family and trying to get out of responsibilities. It was insane. I usually pride myself on staying calm in high-stress situations. It's literally part of my job as a school counselor. But I lost it. I told her she needed to leave our house immediately, or I was calling the police. I know I probably should have handled it better, but after watching her try to manipulate and lie to my husband's face while using this innocent child as a pawn, I couldn't take it anymore. She eventually left, but not before threatening to make us pay and ruin our family. The whole time, Caitlin just stood there looking like she wanted to disappear. That poor kid has probably seen this kind of behavior from her mom before. It breaks my heart. After she left, we talked to Caitlin, who swore she knew nothing about any brother, and then called our friend, who's a lawyer. He told us to document everything and request a formal paternity test through proper legal channels. It's been a week now, and Heather has been texting Michael constantly, like 30 plus messages a day. One minute, she's guilt-tripping him about abandoning his own flesh and blood. The next, she's threatening to tell everyone what kind of man he really is. And then she's back to demanding money. And apparently she's been showing screenshots of some of these conversations to their mutual friends, but editing them to make Michael look bad. We've had 3 different people call Michael asking why he's abandoning his son. I'm just exhausted and worried about what this woman might do next, and angry on behalf of that poor little boy who's being used as a pawn, and concerned about Caitlin and how this is affecting her. Has anyone dealt with anything like this before? What should we do other than the paternity test? I feel like I'm stuck in a crazy situation. Edit. A lot of people are asking if Heather has a history of making false claims like this. Not exactly, but she has a history of being manipulative with money. Like claiming Caitlin needed expensive dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. We later found out from Caitlin there was no dental work. Or saying Caitlin needed a specific expensive calculator for math class when the school provided them for free. Always money-related stuff. Edit 2. To clarify about the timeline, Michael and Heather have been divorced for 5 years. This child is very clearly around 2 years old. There is literally no way this child was conceived during their marriage. And yes, the dates of Michael's work trip are documented with flight receipts, hotel stays, and multiple coworkers who were with him the entire time. Now for the first update. So first off, thanks to everyone who commented on my post a few weeks back. I honestly didn't expect so many responses, and it helped just having people validate that I wasn't overreacting to this whole paternity scam situation. So we did exactly what most of you suggested and what our lawyer friend told us. We sent a formal letter through a family lawyer. We switched from our friend, who does mostly corporate stuff, after many of you pointed out we needed a family law specialist. Thank you. Requesting a paternity test and offering to cover all costs. We figured this would be the end of it because, the kid obviously isn't Michael's, and she would just drop it once she realized we weren't going to hand over money without proof. That's not what happened. At all. Instead of backing down, Heather has gone completely off the deep end. About 4 days after we sent the letter, she showed up at our house at 11:30 at night. 11:30 at night. Pounding on the door and screaming that we needed to talk right now. Michael didn't even open the door, just told her through it that all communication needed to go through our lawyers. She stood out there yelling for almost 20 minutes before finally leaving when we threatened to call the police. Then 2 nights later, she came back, and the night after that, and then started showing up in the middle of the day too. Sometimes with the little boy, Ricky, sometimes without him. Once she actually brought Caitlin with her, Michael's actual daughter, which was just, I don't even know how to describe how inappropriate that was, using a 12-year-old as part of this whole thing. Last week, I came home from work and there was a car parked across from our house. I didn't think much of it until I got inside and happened to glance out the window like an hour later and realized the car was still there. I took a closer look and it was Heather just sitting there, watching our house. She sat there for 4 hours, just watching. It was honestly one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. But it gets worse. She showed up at Michael's office building, literally went to the reception desk and demanded to see him, causing this whole scene in the lobby. Security had to escort her out. His boss was super understanding, thankfully, but some of his coworkers were giving him weird looks after that. And then she showed up at my school, where I work, with children. She literally waited in the parking lot until school was letting out and approached me in front of colleagues and parents and students and started screaming about how I was a home wrecker and stealing her family. The principal had to come out and threaten to call the police before she would leave. I was mortified. Some of the kids were scared, and I had to spend the next day doing damage control with both students and parents who witnessed it. We've documented everything. Dates, times, screenshots of texts, security camera footage from our house, witness statements from people at Michael's office and my school. Our lawyer immediately filed for a temporary restraining order, which was granted last week. But honestly, that just seems to have made her even more angry. I keep telling everyone I'm handling the stress fine, but I'm not. I've lost 6 pounds in the last 2 weeks because I just can't eat. and I've started having these moments where I can't catch my breath when I'm getting ready for work in the mornings, just panicking about whether she's going to show up again. And Michael, God, he's barely sleeping. He keeps blaming himself, even though none of this is his fault. She's also created these fake profiles on Facebook and Instagram where she's posting all this stuff about Michael being a deadbeat dad and tagging our employers and friends and family members. We've reported them, but they just keep popping up with slightly different names. Our family lawyer, who is amazing, by the way, thanks to everyone who pushed us to get a specialist, did some digging and found out that Heather recently lost her job and got evicted from her apartment. So that explains the sudden desperate need for money. But it makes the whole situation even more volatile because she's clearly desperate. But the most concerning update is about Caitlin. When she came for her regular weekend visit a week ago, something seemed off. She was really quiet and barely touched her food at dinner. We asked if she was feeling okay, and eventually she told us her mom leaves her alone a lot, sometimes for days at a time. A 12-year-old left completely alone for days. She said sometimes her mom goes with Craig, that's Heather's on-again, off-again boyfriend, who probably is Ricky's actual father. When we asked about food, Caitlin said the fridge was usually empty and she had to use her allowance money to buy snacks from the corner store. A 12-year-old having to buy her own food. She also said her mom sometimes leaves Ricky with her too. A 12-year-old left alone with a toddler. And then I noticed these bruises on Caitlin's arm and asked about them, and she immediately pulled her sleeve down and changed the subject. We called our lawyer that night and reported everything to CPS first thing the next morning. They took it very seriously, especially given all the other documented erratic behavior from Heather. Our lawyer advised us to file for emergency temporary custody, which we did. The judge ordered a home study for both households and granted us temporary custody of Caitlin until a full investigation could be completed. The judge was super stern during the whole hearing and kept giving us these looks, and I was convinced she was judging us or thought we were making this all up. But our lawyer said afterwards that she was just concerned about the situation and taking it very seriously. Oh, and the paternity test results finally came back and confirmed what we already knew. Michael is not Ricky's biological father. When we tried to provide these results to Heather through our lawyer, she filed a false police report claiming Michael had threatened her with violence. We had police officers show up at our door. Thankfully, we were able to clear things up pretty quickly since Michael had been at work all day with multiple witnesses who could confirm he hadn't been anywhere near Heather. Despite the restraining order that says she has to stay at least 500 feet away from us, our home, and our workplaces, she's been parking down the street from our house almost every night. Sometimes she sits there until morning. We've called the police each time, but by the time they arrive, she's usually gone. We've got cameras set up now pointing in that direction to document it. Caitlin has started therapy. Thankfully, my insurance covers it, and she's slowly opening up about what things were like at Heather's home. Apparently, there was regular drug use happening. Heather would have strange men over at all hours, and there was rarely food in the house. It absolutely breaks my heart. I have such mixed feelings about all this. On one hand, I'm furious and want to protect Caitlin from this toxic environment. But on the other hand, I feel guilty about potentially separating a child from her mother. Like, I keep wondering if there's something else we could have done. Could we have helped Heather instead of just getting a restraining order? But then I remember how she's been behaving and no, there was no reasoning with her. Michael is absolutely upset over the whole situation. He's been staying up late every night researching custody laws and child psychology articles. He's trying so hard to do right by Caitlin while also protecting our family. We've discovered that Heather has something like $40,000 in credit card debt, and based on what Caitlin has described and Heather's behavior, our lawyer thinks there's definitely drug use involved, which makes this all so much more scary because people in that situation can get desperate and unpredictable. I'm honestly terrified about what she might do next. She's already violated the restraining order multiple times, created scenes at our workplaces, tried to damage our reputations online, and filed false reports with the police. What's the next escalation going to be? I keep checking and double-checking that all our doors and windows are locked before bed. I've started having these nightmares where I wake up and she's standing in our bedroom. I know that sounds paranoid, but after everything that's happened, I don't feel safe anymore. Edit. To answer what seems to be the most common question, yes, we've reported every violation of the restraining order to the police, and our lawyer is documenting everything. The problem is that by the time police arrive, she's usually gone, and apparently they need to actually catch her in the act for it to result in consequences. Frustrating, I know. Some people are asking if we've considered moving. Yes, we've discussed it, but we just bought this house last year after saving forever for the down payment. It feels so unfair that we would have to uproot our lives because of her behavior. Plus, with the current housing market, but if things get much worse, we might not have a choice. For those asking about Ricky, the toddler, we're concerned about his welfare too, obviously. Our lawyer is working with CPS to make sure he's being properly looked after. Apparently, Craig, who is likely his actual father based on appearance, didn't even know Heather was claiming Michael was the father and is now getting involved. It's all such a mess. No, I don't think Heather will just get bored and move on, like some of you are suggesting. This isn't just annoying behavior. She's escalating and becoming more erratic. Our lawyer says this kind of pattern is actually really concerning, especially with the financial desperation and possible drug use involved. We're taking every precaution we can. Now for the second update. I know it's been over a month since my last update, and I'm really sorry for disappearing. Things have been, God, I don't even know where to start. Chaotic, terrifying, a complete nightmare. All of the above, I guess. So many of you asked for an update, and I feel bad for not posting sooner, but honestly, I just haven't had the mental energy to relive all this by writing it down. But I think it might help me process everything that's happened. Also, sorry for any typos. I'm typing this on my phone and like half asleep, because I haven't been sleeping well lately. Quick recap for anyone who missed my previous posts. My husband Michael's ex-wife Heather showed up at our door with a toddler claiming it was Michael's, impossible based on timeline, and demanding $20 in back child support. When we requested a paternity test, she got really angry. We discovered Heather was neglecting their actual daughter, Caitlin, 12, got temporary custody, and Heather started stalking us and violating restraining orders. So after we got temporary custody of Caitlin, the Child Protective Services investigation into Heather's home was worse than we expected. They found conditions that were completely unsuitable for children. Evidence of drug use, rotting food in the fridge, utilities that were about to be shut off for non-payment, and general filth everywhere. The CPS worker told our lawyer it was one of the more concerning environments she'd seen recently for a child Caitlin's age. Anyway, we've been working with Caitlin's therapist to help her process her feelings about her mom. Despite everything, Caitlin still loves Heather and feels guilty about the whole situation. The therapist says that's normal, but it's hard to see her carrying all this guilt. She keeps saying things like, maybe if I cleaned the house better, Mom wouldn't be so stressed, and I should have helped more with Ricky, and it's just, no 12-year-old should feel responsible for taking care of their parent and a toddler. I don't have any ill will toward Heather. I just want what's best for Caitlin. But I'll admit, when the judge was reviewing all the evidence against Heather, I felt satisfaction that I'm not proud of. Like finally someone was seeing what we've been dealing with. Does that make me a terrible person? Probably. The formal custody hearing was scheduled for last week. Our lawyer had put together a lot of evidence. The CPS reports, documentation of all the restraining order violations, the false paternity claim, statements from Caitlin's teachers about her frequently coming to school hungry and in dirty clothes, even security footage from our house showing Heather stalking us. Social services had their own report that was also pretty bad. The days before the hearing were really stressful. Michael barely slept at all. I was cleaning the house and baking cookies at 3 a.m., like we were having the judge over or something. Our lawyer kept saying be prepared for any outcome, which I thought meant our case was weak, even though that's not what he meant. The morning of the hearing finally arrived and we got to the courthouse early. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m., and we were there at 7:45, just sitting in the parking lot because we were both too anxious to stay home. When 9 a.m. rolled around, we went in, and Heather wasn't there. The judge waited almost an hour before deciding to proceed without her. Our lawyer presented all the evidence, the social worker gave her testimony, and I thought things were going pretty well. And then, oh my freaking God, you guys. The proceedings had been going for over an hour when suddenly the courtroom doors opened and Heather stumbled in looking like she'd been on a bender for days. Her hair was matted on one side, her clothes were wrinkled, and you could smell the alcohol from across the room. The judge asked her to explain why she was so late, and Heather slurred something about her car breaking down. The bailiff moved closer to her, and that's when Heather spotted me and lost it. She started shouting at me about stealing her life. The judge ordered her to compose herself or be removed from the courtroom. Then she turned to Michael and started accusing him of turning Caitlin against her. Michael just sat there silently, like our lawyer had instructed. Heather started crying and saying she was a good mother who was being persecuted. Then the judge asked her about the evidence of neglect, and she denied everything, but then admitted she smokes weed sometimes, and that doesn't make her a bad mother. The judge asked about her current living situation, and she couldn't provide a stable address or any employment information. And then she suddenly changed tactics and offered to drop the child support claim for Ricky if we would give Caitlin back. She was literally trying to trade one child for money right there in open court. The judge immediately called a recess and ordered a drug test for Heather. She tested positive for multiple substances. The judge granted full custody of Caitlin to Michael with me as a legal guardian. Heather was ordered to complete drug rehabilitation and parenting classes before she could even apply for supervised visitation. We also found out during the proceedings that Craig is definitely Ricky's biological father, but had no idea Heather was claiming Michael was the dad. We were really concerned about the toddler's welfare, so we made sure Craig got this information through our lawyer. Things were actually calm for about 2 days after the custody ruling. Then, in the middle of the night, we got woken up by the sound of breaking glass outside. We ran to the window and saw our car completely vandalized. Child stealers spray painted across it and every window smashed. The security cameras caught the whole thing, and it was definitely Heather. The next day, she showed up at Caitlin's school. She went to the front office and tried to check Caitlin out. Thankfully, the school had been given copies of the custody order and refused to let her take Caitlin. They had to call security to escort her out. Poor Caitlin was so embarrassed and upset. But the worst part happened 2 nights ago. We were all asleep when our home security system alarm went off around 2 a.m. The security alert showed someone trying to force open our back door. Michael called 911 while I ran to check on Caitlin. I was in Caitlin's room when we heard glass breaking from the kitchen window. I grabbed Caitlin and we locked ourselves in the upstairs bathroom while Michael monitored the security feed on his phone. He could see Heather climbing through our broken kitchen window. Michael told her that police were on their way, and Heather started yelling that she was taking her daughter back. We could hear her knocking things over downstairs. Then, we heard her coming up the stairs, and she started pounding on Caitlin's bedroom door. When she realized Caitlin wasn't in her room, she must have heard us in the bathroom because she came straight for that door next. Caitlin was crying and terrified, and Heather started throwing herself against the bathroom door. The door frame was starting to crack, and I was just holding Caitlin trying to keep her calm while also kind of freaking out myself thinking, oh, my freaking God, what if she actually gets in? What am I going to do? There's no window in here to escape through. We could hear police sirens getting closer, and I guess Heather heard them too, because she made one last attempt to break down the door before we heard her running back downstairs. The police found her hiding in our backyard. She was arrested for breaking and entering, violation of the restraining order, vandalism, and attempted kidnapping. Craig has filed for custody of Ricky with evidence that Heather had been keeping him in the dark about his son just to try to get money from Michael. We've moved to a new house with better security systems and enrolled Caitlin in a new school where she's starting to make some friends. She seems to be doing better overall, but this has all been so traumatic for her. I have such mixed feelings about everything. I'm relieved that Caitlin is safe with us now, but I'm sad about all the trauma she's experienced. Heather is facing jail time and has been court-ordered to complete rehab. I keep wondering if things could have turned out differently, but Michael says he had no idea things had gotten this bad. Caitlin still asks about her mom sometimes, and she still blames herself even though we keep telling her none of this is her fault. I don't know what the future holds, especially when it comes to potential reconciliation between Caitlin and Heather years down the road if Heather actually gets clean, but I'm trying to stay hopeful. Yesterday, we surprised Caitlin with a rescue puppy, a a sweet little beagle mix, and she smiled, like really smiled, for the first time in months. So maybe healing is possible even after all this trauma. Edit. So many people are asking about our security measures at the new house. Yes, we have cameras covering every entrance, special reinforced doors and windows, a much better alarm system, and we're actually in a gated community now. Oh, and to the commenter who asked if we're filing for a permanent restraining order, yes, our lawyer is working on that now. Edit 2. For those asking if Heather will get out of jail soon, she's being held without bail right now, pending a psychological evaluation. Our lawyer thinks she'll likely be sentenced to at least 2 to 3 years between all the charges, especially since this wasn't her first offense. Apparently, she had previous drug charges we didn't know about. Edit 3. To the people suggesting we're somehow at fault for breaking up a family, are you serious? We didn't create this situation. Heather's addiction and neglect did. And when faced with evidence that a child was being neglected, what were we supposed to do? Ignore it, would you? As many of you pointed out in my last post, staying silent about child neglect abuse makes you complicit. Edit 4. Thanks for the Reddit gold, kind stranger. I wasn't expecting that. And yes, to answer the most common question, the puppy's name is Luna, and she's the sweetest. Caitlin picked the name herself. Also, so many of you were asking about therapy for me and Michael too. Yes, we've both started seeing someone as well. This has been traumatic for all of us. Edit 5. Forgot to mention, we've received so much support from our community through all this. Like so many of my coworkers at the school stepped up when they heard what happened. They organized a bunch of clothes and supplies for Caitlin since we had to leave a lot of her stuff behind. One of the teachers even got her a special backpack for the new school with all the supplies already inside. People can be really amazing sometimes.